Welcome back to the Vandy 24/7 podcast. Brandon Bigsby, it is transfer portal season, and what a night for Vanderbilt basketball. Two commits announced publicly in one night, and I think there might be another down the pipeline here or there in the next couple days. But for now, we're going to talk about Jalen Washington, North Carolina transfer. Actually, the second guy on Vanderbilt's roster who played for North Carolina, obviously Tyler Nickel as well, but Brandon, interesting night. Jalen Washington, the first commit. Second, Mason Nicholson from Jacksonville State, actually high school teammates, which you basically broke the news on Twitter to everybody. So congratulations. But tell us about Jalen Washington, averaged 5.7 points per game and 4.2 rebounds per game. Brandon, what are your initial impressions?
Well, first and foremost, Joey, I think the biggest thing is that it checks the one box that you felt like it was very obvious that Vanderbilt needed to check over the offseason, which is size. Jalen Washington, 6'10", 235 pounds, and I think the most impressive thing, a 7'4" wingspan as well. So a guy that not only is lengthy but can move a little bit. He's a good defender, solid shot blocker. Not necessarily someone that's going to wow you with athleticism necessarily, but was able to play at a high level in the ACC, played 93 games with North Carolina, started 16 of those, so was a solid rotational piece for them over the last 3 seasons. I think he fits a lot of what Vanderbilt really was lacking in terms of the roster construction. And now you bring him in, it gives you a little bit of that size and takes so much pressure off of somebody like a Devin McLaughlin or like a good Johnny Wright, depending on what his situation is for next season, for them to be those inside presences. So Jalen Washington, maybe not somebody that will stand out to you in terms of the stat sheet, but someone that definitely checks a lot of the boxes that Vanderbilt needed to check for the season. And again, someone with a lot of talent. Was a four-star in the class of 2022. You mentioned Joey, him and Tyler Nickel, teammates for a season. They actually were both in the same recruiting class as well. So those two probably rather familiar with one another there. I like this pickup a lot for Vanderbilt. I think it fills a lot of the needs that we said this team needed coming into the season. Really good buy there for Mark Byington and staff.
For sure. I think if Vanderbilt had Jalen Washington last season, you maybe see it in the round of 32, or you maybe see it with 22 or 23 wins instead of 20. And that's a big thing in itself. He's obviously not playing for last year's team, Jalen Carey, out the door now, but man, his skill set is so impactful. I don't know that he's an awesome shot blocker, but just having a guy who's a true defensive center who is going to drop most of the time, but I think he has the mobility to get out and guard the perimeter a little bit. He's going to alter a lot of shots. He blocked less than a shot per game last year, but I think his impact isn't necessarily summed up in that one number. I think there is some room for him to go defensively. I think they're looking for a little bit more tenacity out of him on that end than maybe he showed at North Carolina, but he's so talented, and the wingspan I think is a huge deal and something that Vanderbilt obviously lacked last season. Mark Byington is a huge wingspan guy. He's a guy who harps on that even over height. And I think you look at Jalen Washington's skill set as that. And you also look at Jalen Washington and say, man, he is an awesome fit with what they want to do. 87th percentile transition player. That was something that they looked for last offseason when they built the roster. They wanted guys who wanted to run. And I think Jalen Washington, in a lot of ways, is your modern college basketball big man personified. He's going to be really good in the pick and roll. He's going to catch lobs. He's got a great wingspan, really nice frame, and man, can he run. And I think that's something that Vanderbilt has looked for throughout all of its big man recruiting over the years. And this is the type of guy that I think it needed to get in order to take its ceiling as a program to the next level. And that sounds a little dramatic to say, but I think with the way their roster was constructed last year, with kind of the makeup of their front court, they had a limit to what they could do. And you obviously have to put a different team together now, right? Jason Edwards is gone, Jalen Carey's gone, MJ Collins is gone. But if you get a good point guard, that makes Jalen Washington infinitely better. And if you have enough pieces on the perimeter, Jalen Washington's going to kind of pull it all together. So it doesn't make them a tournament team next year. It's not a guy, like you said, the numbers don't flash, and he's not going to take over a game. He's not Zach Edey, but they don't need him to be that. They need him to be great in their system, and they need him to be able to present some things that they didn't have on the roster last year. And Brandon, he does that.
Yeah, and something that you said, you're reading my mind, Joey, was that transition stat, 87th percentile. I mean, that is one of the better transition players at his position statistically. So, and not only that, but someone that also has shown that it's not just in transition. He ranked in the 76th percentile in terms of cutbacks. 12% of his scores came from cutback plays. So he's somebody that not only is able to move on the defensive end, but somebody that a lot of this offense comes from being able to move. That fits in perfectly with what Mark Byington wants to do with the system. And as you mentioned, it's going to be a much different makeup of a roster this season. No more Jalen Carey, no more Jason Edwards, MJ Collins, AJ Hoggard. Really, any of the impact guys not named Devin McLaughlin, Tyler Tanner, or Tyler Nickel, they're not on the team this year. So it's going to be a very different looking team, but I think you saw what Mark Byington wants his team to be molded like. I think you saw the identity that Mark Byington wants this team to play under. And you just look at Jalen Washington's game and you can just tell the fit is right there. The fit is right there. And I also just love that Vanderbilt is able to get a player that comes in and has this high major experience. A guy from North Carolina, played a lot of games in North Carolina. Again, maybe not somebody that jumps off the page statistically, but he suited up in 93 games, started 16 of them. That means something for a program like North Carolina. He's going up against Clemson and Duke two, three times a year, going up against the Louisvilles of the world. So this is a guy that is used to playing high major basketball. The transition to the SEC won't be too big of a jump for him. And I think that's really encouraging and not something that we really have got to say a lot about Vanderbilt's transfers over the last couple of years, outside of Tyler Nickel and MJ Collins coming from Virginia Tech and AJ Hoggard coming from Michigan State. So I think that's another really good add, is that you get an experienced player at the high major level that also is a really, really good fit. Like you mentioned, Joey, maybe not somebody where you look at and you're like, man, this is a tournament team now because Jalen Washington's in the fold, but definitely somebody that I think helps fill a much needed hole for this Vanderbilt team that not only did it have last season, but Mark Byington was very, very clear that he wanted to try to build on for this upcoming season as well.
Sure. Along the lines of the experience piece too, played in 5 NCAA tournament games and was a real contributor in their round of 64 loss this year to Ole Miss. So he's a guy who has proven what he can do. And I also think he fits the mold of what Byington wants, not only play style wise, but he came on the podcast last year and said what they were looking for in transfers were guys who have proven what they can do at the Power Five level or in college in general, and also guys who felt like they could do a little bit more than they did. And North Carolina's front court was very heavily scrutinized last year. I don't think that's any secret. Van Allen Lubin was kind of their primary big. He played 4 more minutes per game than Washington did. Now is the time for Jalen Washington to develop and blossom into a starting big in the SEC, in the best conference in the country. Brandon, it feels like there's more for him to go as a player. And I don't think that necessarily means he's going to be a primary option on offense. If he's one of your primary options offensively, if he's one of your top 2 or 3 guys on the floor offensively, I don't think that's a great lineup or a lineup that is necessarily an NCAA tournament team. But if you surround him, if you get a really good point guard like Vanderbilt has had in the past, if you have a few guys who can shoot it on the wing, he just takes the level of that team and raises it tremendously. Rather than having Devin McLaughlin play out of position and at the 5, now he can go to the 4, which an underrated story here. And now some of the pressure's taken off of him defensively. Another thing too, like he's not going to take over the game or anything, but I thought this was a telling quote from Hubert Davis in the preseason. This was referring to the summer and fall programs, I think. He said he's been our best rebounder, our best screener, our best big in shape running the floor. He shoots the ball extremely well from the outside, does a really good job in space off of rolls, off of ball screens, dribble handoffs, being able to finish around the basket and attacking the offensive glass. That's what we need. And if North Carolina needs it, Vanderbilt needs it as well. Now you just got to go get a good point guard, and that makes Washington, that takes his game up a level. And that's what Vanderbilt's got to do now. It paired him with Mason Nicholson from Jacksonville State and Brandon high school teammates. We've got something on Nicholson coming in the next few minutes, so make sure to tune in for that on the YouTube channel. Also have a bunch of stuff on the site, Jalen Washington full breakdown on there. If you want even more Jalen Washington content, if you're excited, get on Vandy 24/7. And then Nicholson, there's going to be a video and a story up on him in a minute too. So, Brandon, I'll leave it to you for your closing thoughts, but I think everybody might be gone. They might be on Vandy 24/7 right now. So, say whatever you want.
I mean, really, Joey, I think this is just a really solid addition for Vanderbilt. I mean, again, maybe not somebody to where, you look back and you're saying this is, the addition that gets Vandy into the tournament next year. But, if you go back to last year, I don't really think a lot of people were looking at Devin McLaughlin that way either. And I think you could make a case that Devin McLaughlin was arguably one of Vanderbilt's most consistent players throughout last season. And, just kind of one final note, you mentioned Jalen Washington's ability to shoot a little bit on the outside. It might not pop out to you statistically at first glance, a 32.5% three-point shooter, but in his sophomore year, he went 8 for 15. Last year, went 5 for 18. So, I think there could maybe be some room for him to potentially have an outside shot that he just hasn't gotten the opportunity to really exemplify yet. Not saying he's going to be, a flamethrower from deep necessarily, but I do think that that is much more of an ability that he has than maybe what the stats in the film may show you, just because that's not what he was asked to do really at North Carolina. That wasn't really the role that was presented to him. Now you're kind of in a role in the system at Vanderbilt to where there is a lot of that perimeter play. There's a lot of that spacing, and there's going to be a lot of possessions to where you see a lot of the wings for Vanderbilt go and take threes. You saw Devin McLaughlin get a lot of good looks from three and convert on a lot of them, despite him not being somebody that coming into the year was heralded as this great three-point shooter. He was somebody that by the end of the year was a threat that had to be accounted for. I think Jalen Washington is very similar to that. So thought that was an interesting note. I like this addition for a lot for Vanderbilt. I think it fills a lot of needs. I think Jalen Washington has the natural talent, and a really cool story too to see the two high school teammates together as well with him and Nicholson. I like this a lot for both sides. I think it's a really, really nice fit.
Yeah, I do think he's a capable shooter, and obviously the numbers don't present themselves as numbers that tell you he's going to be an awesome shooter. But for context, Van Allen Lubin rarely ever shot threes this year for North Carolina. And I thought he was a capable shooter down the stretch for Vanderbilt when he was at Vanderbilt. Washington had more of a green light than Lubin had this year, which makes me think maybe if he has more of a green light than he did at UNC, that he could be an effective shooter. But Brandon, I think it's a really nice addition for Vanderbilt, one that I think, like we mentioned, raises its ceiling and allows it to maybe take the next step if it can surround Washington and Nicholson with the right parts. Vanderbilt's got to start here and it's got to keep building this roster. But I think you always, if you're a Vanderbilt fan, like to see a UNC guy come in who was a four-star recruit and contributed on an NCAA tournament team. Vanderbilt sticking to its mold of guys who have proven it but want to prove more now that they're at Vanderbilt. So, Brandon, I'm Joey Dwyer. You're Brandon Bigsby. Check out the other stuff on the site. Check out the video that's about to come out in a few minutes. But thank you guys for watching. God bless. And we'll talk to you soon. Peace.